So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here with us on this discussion on Armenia. My name is Lucas Katsonis, and I am the head of the Foreign Affairs Institute based in Athens, Greece. We often organize such discussion in parallel with larger events, virtual, in person, or in hybrid fashion, according to the circumstances. This time, our discussion is only virtual, as our guest speakers are all in different countries. Mr. Avedis Hadjian, journalist and the author of the book under the title Secret Nation, The Hidden Armenians in Turkey, is located in Italy. Mr. Tigrane Yegavian, also journalist and an author and a researcher at the Centre Francais de Recherche sur le Renseignement, is based in France. And the moderator, Emilio Cricchio, a British journalist, is based in Yerevan. Me, as I said before, I'm in Greece. So we will take advantage of the technology that allow us to be so far and so close at the same time. And hopefully we will present you an insightful discussion about the Armenians and the Islamic world, and also the role of the Armenian diaspora around the globe. So, dear Emilio, the floor is yours to begin. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Lucas, and thank you for joining us today. I want to start off with the topic of Islamized Armenians. Tigrane, initially, what attracted you to the topic of Islamized Armenians? And can you explain exactly what is an Islamized Armenian?
Okay, so I must precise that my topic is more focused on Eastern Christian, Middle Eastern Christians. But as I was working in Turkey in the late 2007 until 2009, and in order to learn Turkish, I started to work as well on the topic of Islamized Armenian, because it encompassed the global Armenian question, and it's something misunderstood, misknown, and it holds a strategic dimension when we are looking about Armenian question nowadays. I'm quite convinced that the question of Islamized Armenians must be part of the Armenian agenda of the 21st century when we are looking about what is at stake when we're looking about the Armenian nation future. And I think that what is very amazing with Islamized Armenian, especially with the Hamshin Armenian or the Alevi Armenian coming from Dersim, who are looking for their roots and for their origins, is that they have not the same perspective of the time. When we are looking at diaspora, Armenianness is linked with memory and genocide recognition, but without agenda, without vision, without any claims and perspective. And when we are looking from a Turkish perspective, Armenian Turkish perspective, is another glance. And what is very striking is that the Armenian from Dersim and from Western Armenia consider Armenian genocide question as a current topic, a question of. Can you please switch off the micro, please? Yeah. I can help myself. So that's why I was interested about this topic, and then I wrote some articles for French Armenian press. But I think that Avedis is much more aware than me in order to express his opinion about this topic.
Aris, if I can just ask you to turn off your microphone, please. Maybe he can't hear me. We'll cut this bit out, hopefully. Avedis, the same question. I mean, Islamized Armenians is something that many of us don't know much about. What initially attracted you to the topic of Islamized Armenians? Why were you galvanized to research more and understand more about this subject? Avedis, your microphone, you have to turn your microphone.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So I think there are different reasons why I approached this topic. Initially, it was just, and I'm talking initially in a completely different world in the mid-80s. When I was a teenager, I found out by chance in a little book in French called Le Musulman Oubli, The Forgotten Muslims. I found a very brief paragraph about the Hamshans, which very, very briefly, it was just a paragraph that said they are Muslim Armenians who live mostly in the northeast of Turkey, parts of Georgia and parts of Armenia, or parts of Georgia and southern Russia, I think. And it also spoke about some Muslim Hamshans that had been basically deported to Central Asia under Stalin in the 40s, I believe. So so in the beginning it was just curiosity, and as Hrant Dink started talking about these hidden Armenians or secret Armenians who lived in Turkey, and he also spoke about figures. I'm really cautious about talking about numbers of Islamicized Armenians, which is, and I understand why, it's the first question you think about, how many of them there are. So as Hrant Dink started talking about that, and after his tragic murder, there seemed to be an opening in Turkey about coming to terms with their past and opening up to Armenians. I thought it could be an opportunity to explore more about them, and maybe hope for them to return to their roots. So I approached in an idealistic way. I approached this community with an ideal in mind, right? And obviously, when you haven't been there and you really haven't been in touch with them, you tend to imagine, or you tend to think of them as a clear-cut group, who more as a community. Whereas when you arrive in Turkey, you see, and I'm sure that was the Ukrainians' experience too, it's they're scattered all over the country. They're not necessarily in touch. They represent a variety of views and political affiliation. They differ immensely in how they relate to their Armenian identity or to their Armenian roots. Some are Turkish nationalists, even some of them who acknowledge that they're of Armenian origin. Some of them have gone through the full cycle of conversion, and now they're devout Muslims. So so that kind of shattered the view I had of them, the initial view I had, and I came to a more detached view of this. I'm not sure I can call it a community, but about this group. So yeah, in the beginning it was the hope, I believe, and that's the deeper reason. When you come, as Tigrane was mentioning in passing, from the diaspora, which is traumatized by the memory of the genocide, suddenly discovering that there are still Armenians left on the historical lands, regardless of their religious affiliation, which you tend to disregard when you grow up in big cities in the West, because you don't really care about the religion of your neighbors or who's on the bus with you in New York or in Paris or in London. You don't really care about that, or who's your friend and what's his race or religion. But whereas when you go to Turkey and you are Armenian, and when you come face to face with Islamicized Armenians who do the namaz, the Muslim prayers, or who go to pilgrimage to Mecca, then it shocks you into realizing, oh no, this is something entirely different. It's not like multicultural and multi-religious city in the West. It's an entirely different dimension. Also in the way they approach their own identity. I mean, if this was New York, I wouldn't really care about that, but in the circumstances, it was different from what I imagined, even though it was fascinating regardless.
And I mean, the Armenian diaspora, which is located throughout the world, as diasporans, how do you, Tigrane, let's start with you. How do you think diasporan Armenians should approach this community? Should there be an attempt to relate to them, to incorporate them? What do you think? How should we approach these Islamized Armenians?
Well, just let me begin that I think that there is a huge psychological gap when we are assessing this question, this issue, which is a very sensitive issue coming from diaspora, where, especially in France, which is one of the more politicized Armenian communities worldwide. And people are not ready to deal with this issue because they are not skilled and prepared to face the reality of the complexity, of the Armenianness, because Islamized Armenian issue brings more hybridity, more hybridism, more complexity toward this the global identity, and this is something very hard. And I'm not sure that people here are ready to face this challenge. But I think that we are much to learn from the experience and the past of the Islamized Armenians, and something began, something has been started with the experience and the legacy of Ramdink in the late 2000, 2005, 2006, when he came in France and he made lectures and he talked about the role of the Islamized Armenian as a bridge between Armenia and diaspora, between Turkey and diaspora as well. And he stressed of the necessity to say that, yes, we have a glance, we have something to make concrete in this country, and Islamized Armenian may be may play a very crucial role in order to reconcile Armenian identity towards its past. But it's not a very easy thing when we at the same time you are facing the denial, I mean the negationism. And it's not something black and white when you deal with this issue, because as Avedis remind us, Islamized Armenians are also suffering a huge complex of identity. And I think that we are in diaspora, we need to create more media, more books, scientific books, and Avedis made a wonderful research. But as well, you have Ovan Simonian case, who wrote a wonderful book on the ancient Armenians. But we need as well to develop nor media, nor stories, nor narratives, nor books, nor drama, nor movies on this issue. Because unfortunately, the Armenian identity denominator in Europe, especially, is linked with folklore. The folklore, the memory, the incapacity to look on other issues which are strategic for the Armenian nation worldwide. So we need more media, more content, and especially a new narrative. And who can help us in order to make this new narrative? Of course, intellectuals, progressive intellectuals in diaspora, in Istanbul, but as well Armenian civil society in Turkey and in Armenia, and Kurdish and leftist Turkish civil society in Turkey. They are, I think, part of the solution. And we, as Armenian diaspora, we must understand something very important, that we cannot afford to live in the 20th century soft world. We're still living in a very old software, in a very old paradigm. So in order to create a new relation toward their identity, we need to deal with Armenian Islamized issue because it's definitely a question of a new awakening, create a new identity awakening in the Armenian nation, and a way to understand that Armenianness is not limited with the Republic of Armenia and Artsakh. It's something more rich, more complex. And I hope, okay, I will stop here. Then I hope we will talk about the role of the church, which is very interesting.
Well, I'll come back to you about the role of the church, but I want to ask the same question to Avedis. I mean, as the Armenian diaspora as an entity, how should it approach this community of Islamized Armenians? What do you think?
I tend to be worried about prescribing approaches. I'm all for freedom of expression in the broadest sense of the word, in the sense that if anybody in the diaspora or anywhere in the world feels like approaching this group of people in his or in their own terms, that's fine with me. I don't think it's anyone's purview to define who is Armenian or who is not. Obviously, there are very clear standards for that if you are born in the Republic of Armenia or if you're born in Artsakh. But in the diaspora, it's more of a it's more debatable, if you want, or in the special circumstances of these people who suffered enormous trauma, and it's very easy to judge why they converted or if they could avoid conversion. It's really their call if they want to call themselves or consider themselves Armenian or not. As for the diaspora, I have to say that in my own experience, at least, apart from a few incidents I know of in which very exalted diaspora Armenians went with Armenian flags, as I would have anyway, I can understand why they do it, and trying, to fire up the bases in Hamshen or other places in the middle of Turkey, which only generated fear among the locals, because it increased their exposure to the hostility of their neighbors. Other than that, it's been, in my experience, it's been very positive because it has contributed on both ends of the relationship to understand more about the other, to rediscover parts of their own identity that they weren't aware of. Both Islamicized Armenians and diaspora Armenians. Some even found relatives decades later, a century later after the genocide. I know of one particular case of a family in what was Sis or Hadjian in the region of Adana, who found long lost relatives in Beirut and in Buenos Aires. So it's been mostly positive, and I think as long as it is not manipulated, and I know why I am saying this, and it is not out of sympathy for Turkey, obviously, but as long as it is not manipulated by organizations who have fantastic ideas about how many Islamicized Armenians there are, or about their capacity, their agency for political change in Turkey, which would expose them to tremendous dangers, especially today in Turkey, which is always a dangerous country for Armenians, regardless of their religion. It's been a mostly positive experience. And a lot of that has happened through Facebook. It's very easy to malign Facebook, and it has a bit of a mixed reputation these days. But Facebook has contributed a lot to to tear down walls that separated Armenians from diaspora and Armenians in Turkey. In the interior of Turkey, I'm not talking about Constantinople, I'm talking about people who are in little villages in the Armenian highlands in Anatolia, in little villages that approach the outside world with a lot of suspicion. The Turks, let alone the Armenians who are converted in those villages, who are still called dönme or converts 4 or 5 generations down the line. That's the level of rejection they still face among their neighbors.
And I mean, Tigrane, I want to ask about the role of the Armenian church, the Armenian Christian church. Is there a way the church could be involved with regards to the Islamized Armenian question? I mean, could they perhaps help them to find a path towards their roots? What do you think of the Armenian church's role or possible role?
Well, it's a very crucial and critical question, because as you maybe know, Armenian Patriarchate in Istanbul played a very significant role in the 60s, 70s of the last century in order to save children from Anatolia, who were Armenian, or maybe Islamized, but Armenian children. And they bring to Istanbul in order to receive an Armenian education. And that's how Aranding became who was Aranding. And all the same generation who grew up in the Tebrevank school of Istanbul, Üsküdar neighborhood. And Armenian church, and as well as evangelical Armenian church, play a very crucial role in that time, in very difficult conditions, because they were a huge threat and they suffered a lot. But what is missing within Armenian Apostolical Church as a national institution and as the center of the Armenian faith, the Christian faith, sorry, is there is no vision, no policy, and I will add no theology of the context of the Armenian context. We miss a theology of diaspora and a theology of Armenian, Islamized Armenians, because there is no testimony and there is no theology. So a theology critical response of genocide and the genocide outcomes and the faith of the Islamized Armenians. And I think that the Armenian church as a global national institution must think about this challenge and must write a kind of theology in order to bring responses of the future of this hybrid group of Armenian who maybe want to receive the baptism, maybe not. But one thing is sure is that this new category, new group of Islamized Armenian are bringing something new for the Armenian nation. And we must be prepared to receive and to accept this alterity. And I don't think that Armenian conservatism society in diaspora, as well as in Armenia, are ready to accept this new reality. But what I'm sure is that it's up to Armenian church to write a new theology, a new testimony, in order to give them importance and give them as well a kind of justice, because they are like no orphans, they are like abandoned by Armenian institution. I remember when I was in Istanbul, I met some Armenians Islamized Armenians who received the baptism in a secret way, the island of Kanalı. In the island of Kanalı, you have got a very nice church, and then you have a very beautiful place, a garden then. And it's something very emotional when you meet Armenian from Sasun, from Taron, Vaspurakan, which are our homeland. You cannot keep insensitive because they are I think, more Armenian than us, because they keep Armenianness in the country, in the homeland, and we grew up in Western societies, in consumerism, consumption societies, and we cannot. I think it's something very usual. So yes, in order to sum up, I think that the challenge of Armenian Church is to, I think, make critical changes in order to accept these new realities and to write something like a theology of exile. By the way, we haven't not until today a theology of exile and a theology for diaspora, because what is at stake now when we're looking about Eastern Christianity is the necessity to make something like an aggiornamento, there is a Latin word, for these churches, which are not ready to deal with the current challenges. And the current challenge is to accept the new realities, the new the new context of these societies. And Armenian Church main weakness is that they consider Armenianness as a religion, and the Christian message as something, I think, conservative, national rights, obviously, something conservative. And we cannot, you cannot carry on in the same way, because we are losing all the sense of our identity, of spiritual values. And strongly believe that there is a metaphysic of diaspora, as there is a metaphysic of Islamized Armenians. Very interesting. Very few Armenian authors, very few Armenian writers have been interested about this topic, or they wrote something superficial. But I can just quote a writer which I'm very, I think I'm impressed, and I carry too much, is Bayo Shagan, who is for me one of the best novelist and poet of Armenian diaspora, who was born in 1920 and died born in Bulgaria and died in the USA in 2000. And he tried, I think, to explore this new ways, new path, but he didn't really achieve what he was aiming at.
And Avedis, are these Islamized Armenians aware of their identity, or are they not aware of their identity? And if they do become aware of their identity, how does that happen? Does that happen through a revelation from a family member? Is it through interacting with Armenians or diasporan Armenians? Can you tell us a bit about that process?
It's a bit all of the above, except for the diaspora Armenians, which is a later phenomenon. But it's usually their neighbors, even when it's not their parents or their relatives or their families, because they tended to be stigmatized for being Armenians as kids. You know how kids are, so they would be bullied and they wouldn't understand why. And there are all of these pejoratives that vary from place to place. So in Turkish-speaking parts is dönme, which is convert. In other parts it's Armenian right away, which is Armenian, and sometimes they attach a curse word to that too in Turkey. In other places, there are some different Kurdish pejoratives. Kurds are reluctant to acknowledge those words as pejoratives, but they are. One of them in southeastern part of Turkey is Muslimin, which is kind of fake Muslim, and the other word they have for which is the more common word for Armenian is fela, which is roughly equivalent to infidel, but they tend to say no, it's not that, but it tends to be a pejorative, even though it makes them uncomfortable. So the way they learn about their identity is by a combination of these things. Sometimes it's their parents when they are teenagers. I know of very few cases of people who are of Armenian origin, but their parents haven't told them. even if they are, grown up adults now, people in their 30s, and they don't know of their Armenian origin because their parents have kept it from them. They've actually moved from their hometowns to other places to, to cover their tracks, so to speak. And I know of a case of a family who moved from Kütahya or Gudina in Armenian and Greek to Adana to completely cover their tracks, and they didn't want me. They didn't want me to interview their children, their grown-up children. I mean, because they didn't want me. They didn't want them to find out about their origins. I didn't obviously believe me when I told them I wasn't going to tell them anything about their origins, and to which they reposted. So why would you want to interview them? What's interesting about them if you're not going to ask them about their origins? Whereas what I wanted to see is this. I wanted to see not how they relate to something they don't know, but I wanted to see how they relate to something they do know, which is they believe they are Turks. And I wanted to see or to gauge the intensity of their or not of their Turkish patriotism. So, and I'm saying this for a reason. A lot of these Islamicized Armenians that I met would tell me that when they were young and then when they went to school, especially in the Kurdish areas of the country, they would tell me that they would notice differences in the households of their classmates and their own, in the way their moms were treated by their father, in the way they were free to mingle with their sisters, in the fact that they had furniture at home and they wouldn't eat out of a tray or the shofar, as they call it in Turkish, on the floor. In the food they prepared, in certain words that they couldn't really know what they were, but they thought it was dialect, but they were Armenian words. Hats, jur, dagajan. So they thought these were, conversational words, and they didn't pay attention, but they realized it had to be something else, because they noticed this way of life differences, which are very subtle when you're young, but you sense something is amiss. And that's why I wanted to interview these these men who didn't know they were Armenian, to see if they perceived something different. Anyway, it didn't happen. But yes, most of them do know. Some go to great lengths to hide it, out of safety or for not to be stigmatized in society, which is very common in the interior, especially in parts of Cilicia, in Giligia, in Marash, it's a terrible place. Parts of Urfa too, it can be dangerous too. Not so much because of anti-Armenian racism, but because of religious conservatism, whereas in Marash is Turkish nationalism. So it varies from place to place. Dikranagar is a very friendly environment, as I'm sure Dikran has witnessed, even for Islamicized or Islamicized Armenians who have returned to the church. I know of at least one case of a Marxist Armenian in Dikranagar who was a complete atheist, but who returned to the church because he didn't want to be a Muslim Armenian. So he had himself baptized in Echmiadzin. So I tend to take a more positive approach to what the church is doing for the Islamicized Armenians. By its very definition, the church is a conservative institution. I tried to explore, and that is interesting, Dikran, that you brought it up. I tried to explore the case of Muslim Armenians from a theological perspective, but I soon found out, and I understood why so many Armenian priests and theologians were reluctant to speak about that, because I soon found out that the framework of reference in Christianity or in the Armenian church to analyze their cases, martyrology. So that was going to take me down a path that would take me to uncharted territory. And I really didn't want to go there because I wasn't sure that I wanted to write or that I wanted to arrive at conclusions from a theological perspective that I didn't want to share in my book. So I hope that answered the question. I'm sorry if I didn't.
No, very much so. It very much answered my question. Please, Tigrane, if you have something to say.
Yeah, just try to add some elements that Avedis already mentioned. So we talk about shame, about feeling fair, safety, lack of safety, stigmatization, which are common for all Armenian Islamites. But as Avedis pointed out, is that you cannot compare the situation of Islamized Armenian living in the northern eastern part of Turkey than the other living in the Kurdish Kurdistan, like Diyarbakir. When you're in Diyarbakir, there is no taboo about Armenian question. Armenian genocide is already recognized. There is no thing about this. So it is another perspective, another way to live with your past and with your identity. Even if Kurds are, mixed, they have mixed feelings, and they are always denying themselves that their role, or they recognize the role, the act during the genocide, and they say that they are living in a kind of malediction since the Armenian genocide, because they never find peace and liberty and freedom. So this is a very interesting thing. But let me just say that in 2004, Turkish society, especially Islamized Armenian Turkish society, has been deeply traumatized by the publication of Fatih Çetin book, My Grandmother, which tells the story of a Turkish leftist lawyer who discovered that her beloved grandmother at the end of her life was Armenian. And when she published her story, and she was, as you reminder, the lawyer of Aranding, this book has been definitely get a huge impact in Turkey and as well in diaspora. And it's through this kind of testimonies that older voices may be heard, thanks to the work of sociologists, academics, and writers like Ayşe Nur, etc., that they began to write a new narrative. And this is what, thanks to the context of the opening of Turkish society, of the rule, AKP rule, when they were looking to a more European integration. So it was at that time that Turkish Armenian society, community, and Turkish Armenian Islamized group could benefit to this context of openness and democratization. But no, the most important is to understand of how to find out a new narrative in order to make new synergy, a new parallel between 3 or 4 categories. So Islamized Armenians, Armenian states must play a more critical role towards Turkish Armenian, Islamized Armenians, by creating new special medias, new outlets medias. For instance, we missed, when you are in Yerevan, you can hear in the radio FM Turkish radio stations, but we are not broadcasting from Armenia Turkish language programs for Islamized Armenian, which is something we missed. Don't forget that the first Kurdish radio were broadcasted from Armenia, from Soviet Armenia, Radio Yerevan. And if you go to Eastern Anatolia, it's not right to find young girls called Yerevan, because they were convinced that Yerevan was part of Kurdistan, because the unique radio station broadcasted in Kurdish language were called Radio Yerevan. So this is something anecdotic, but it's important to understand all. And we are journalists, and we know what we're talking about. How important was this kind of impact that we can deliver a new message, new narrative throughout Armenian broadcast, Kurdish speaking and Turkish speaking programs and websites, web TVs, with professional journalists coming from Turkey, which is very important because, this is not just a question of material resources, but as well human resources. And we can find this kind of people throughout our networks in Dersim, in Istanbul, in Diyarbakir, etc. So I think it is a strategic issue. And Armenia must deliver a new message, not just Armenian church, but Armenian state toward this society. And the other message we must deliver from our diaspora perspective is that to understand clearly that as a former Anatolian Armenian, we are belonging to Turkish diaspora, whether we want or we don't want, but this is a reality. We are not belonging to the current Republic of Armenia's diaspora. We are not belonging to the Armenian transnational community. We are part of the Western Armenian society, Ottoman Armenian diaspora. And as former Ottoman Armenian, we also have a message to deliver. We are also a testimony to share with our compatriots in Anatolia. And it's something we are not aware of it. It's a question of awareness and skills also, and transmission. And I want to make it very clear when I'm talking with our Armenian friends that we are not belonging to their diaspora, whether they want or they don't want, whether they want to control us or they don't want to control. We are belonging to Turkish diaspora. That's why the question to get Turkish citizenship is interesting. Although this, of course, has a manipulated dimension because it's a question of, propaganda and how to neutralize the Armenian diaspora voice. But diaspora has a role to play, I'm quite convinced, in order to make up a new narrative.
But Tigrane, don't you think that there may be some stigma amongst Armenians in the diaspora, for example, about being Armenian on one hand and being Muslim on the other hand? And could that also be that those Islamized Armenians do not think that they will be accepted by Armenians for the mere fact that they are Muslims and very much integrated in Turkish society?
I don't say it's easy. It's not easy, especially for Armenian conservatives and people who consider that Christianity is the first denominator, the first identity denominator. But I see the shift, a sociological shift, psychological shift in diaspora in Turkey. I can witness that mixed marriage are growing. So we can prevent it. It's very hard to prevent mixed marriages because finally Armenian Turkish is Armenian. So this is something natural. It's a phenomenon. And in diaspora we are not ready to accept this new situation. But I think that this is important to understand and to make a clear distinction between the Turkish state and Anatolia as our homeland. We belong to Anatolia, and without being romantic, there is in Turkey people who can understand us because they are belonging to other spaces, to other references. Don't forget that more or less approximately 70% of Turkish population is not coming from Anatolia. They're coming from the Balkans, Caucasus, Middle East, Iran, so especially Greece, Crete, etc. So they can understand us if we are delivering, a very a new narrative. So I just can hope that intellectuals in diaspora must be more aware of this issue, because it's not a political issue, it's a question of civil societies, because political parties in diaspora are not ready to deal with this because there is no more Armenian ideology, no more Armenian political thought in diaspora. Unfortunately, there is a huge lack of political thought, but fortunately we are good artists, we are good filmmakers. Look for instance of the case of Serge Avedikian, who in France make a very interesting work with the village of his grandfather in Sullers next to Bursa, by making a new kind of dialogue, by dialoguing with the people of the village of his ancestors. And he made several movies, drama, documentaries about the history of the village of his grandfather, and he talked a lot with people from there. And is not naive. He knows of difficulties to speak with Turks who are fully victim of Turkish state propaganda or negationist, and they are repeating, like, you know, the Turkish narrative. But what is interesting is that what we can keep in mind is that it's not identity is the product of what you live, what you share, and it's not the contrary. So identity is the result of this process, is the outcome of this process. So the more you go to Turkey, the more you go to Anatolia to explore your roots, to develop new relations with progressive people who accept their past, the more you will create a new identity, a new belonging, feeling of belonging. And this is very important for youth Armenians who are looking to their past and their future, and they want to understand, to make a sense of all this, that to understand that Armenianness is not limited to Armenia states and to Artsakh state, but it's also encompassed all the reality of Anatolia, and Anatolian Armenians are no more ghosts. And I remember when I was a kid, I watched a movie of Francais de Recherche, which I was very impressed. It's called Garot. The name Garot is the story of an Anatolian Armenian who has been expelled from Turkey, and he crossed the border, the Soviet Turkey boundary, in a secret way, and he was punished after that. But he discovered the reality of an empty Western Armenia full of ghosts. And I think that this land or to need us, this land needs us, especially. I remember when I was in the town, the village of my grandfather in Arabkir in the northern of Malatya, I felt how important it is to keep a human and relation with our land. It's very important. It's not just tourism, remember tourism. It's something which is hard to explain because it has a metaphysical dimension. And it's very important, I think, to keep it in mind that Western Armenia is not just a question of memory or of ghosts, etc., but it's also a question to rebuild our fragmented identity and try to find up and to achieve our unity, because what characterizes, what is the features of the Armenian diaspora is the fragmentation. We are very fragmented in a lot of, the pieces of a puzzle. Look about Avedis, who is from an Armenian Syrian family, grew up in Argentina, studied in the United States, living in Italy. I'm born in France. I was born in France. I grew up in Portugal. I lived in Switzerland, in Syria, in Lebanon, and a little bit in Turkey. Now I'm in France, but I feel strongly Armenian of diaspora, because diaspora is just not a question of communities. It's a question of living your Armenian identity in a metaphysical way. So that's why Islamized Armenian issue remains a very crucial question.
And Avedis, I want to ask you, in terms of that stigma, shouldn't we as Armenians also recognize what drove these people to convert or become Muslims? It was, in a sense, for their own safety. Can you tell us about how these people became Islamized Armenians, and how we should also recognize that it was done partially for safety?
Yes, sometimes, in most cases, it was inevitable. Even though I know of very few cases of quote unquote willing conversion, the fact is that in parts of Turkey or occupied Western Armenia, where the rites of passage of life, mostly funerals, but also weddings, that kind of thing, are religious based. We tend to forget that because we live in mostly secular cities in Western societies. But when you live in a place like, I don't know, Yozgat, to tell you something, or in a little village near Kars, you have no choice but to go to an imam to bury your loved ones, to your father, your mom. These are inevitable rites of passage of life, right? So you inevitably become Muslim. I think there is a general understanding, apart from some very conservative sectors, that you do not really, interestingly enough, you do not find them in the diaspora, but as probably Tigrane knows, you find them in the most conservative groups of the Armenian community of Constantinople, who have, you know, stuck to their church, and I respect them too, because they you know, stayed loyal to their own faith and to their own church in very difficult circumstances. So there's something to be said about that too, and that needs to be acknowledged. I don't say this in a critical way, just I'm trying to describe it here. I'm not part of that community, so I don't think it's fair for me to judge them. But they are, even Christians from Sassoon I've seen in Constantinople, who approached me to tell me. I remember a particular evening, one evening during a presentation of a book by a Turkish historian who's very sympathetic to Armenians, who's written excellent books. Just trying to remember his name. Just give me a second. Osman Köker. And there was this lady who approached me, feeling stigmatized that evening, in a posh place in Constantinople, to tell me, you know, I'm Armenian and I'm Christian and I am from Sassoon. And we all three of us know how the echoes of the word Sassoon for us Armenians. It's very moving, as Tigrane was saying before, to see people from Sassoon, Mush, places that sound mythical for us in the diaspora. And she said, I am Christian, I'm Armenian, I'm from Sassoon. By necessity, I speak Turkish. I didn't have a way to learn Armenian, but they called me a Kurd here. And out of the blue, she approached me. She knew I was writing this book. So anyway, leaving that aside for a moment, it's really very, very tricky. Again, I had a very romantic vision about them when I went there, but I'm glad that Tigrane here is bringing a different angle to this topic, because, you know, it's these are the differences that make the world go round. So I approached these Islamicized Armenians with this romantic view of that, okay, regardless of their religion, they're Armenian too. And we in the diaspora, interestingly enough, are very much aware of the circumstances in which they converted. But when I saw up close and I don't say this in an offensive way, but when you see up close, living among them, what Islam is, I'm not sure that's something I would necessarily embrace as an Armenian, to see large parts of Armenian society adopting customs and traditions and values that I, as an Armenian, find alien, and that are alien to what our culture and our history is. I am all for embracing them. But going to your first initial question, Emilio, it is, and this is the key part here. It's not a matter of choice. When you live in the interior, Turkey has perfected the mechanism of genocide. So in other words, Turkey is a vast ecosystem of genocide. When you are Christian And you even, as there is one person or two persons I know in Mush who still speak perfect Armenian, perfect Western Armenian, and I'll come back to that some other time. They speak what's called Central Armenian. It's a variant of Armenian that's forgotten about, except by Revon Talishan, who knew everything. I don't know why or how, from the island of San Lazzaro here in Venice. But anyway, but when you live in this vast ecosystem of genocide, okay, so you're Armenian, you speak Armenian, you are a Christian, but there are no churches left. There are no schools left. You're not allowed to go to Armenian school. You're not allowed to open an Armenian school. You're not allowed to open an Armenian church. There are no priests. It is inevitable that sooner or later you will become Muslim, and a Turk or a Kurd. And that's why the mechanics of genocide self-perpetuate themselves. And that's what Turkey has perfected. For Turkey, genocide has been foundational, and the conversion of these people is part of that genocide. Because when you have a community, not only Armenians, the Greeks too, the Assyrians or Syriacs too, who are converting to something else, and they are stopping being what they were because of forced conversion, because of war, because they are the state, a genocidal government is imposing on them a new religion, a new identity. They are being forced to change their names. It's the very basic core of our identity. When you are asked who you are, the first answer you give, unless you are an extreme nationalist Armenian, it's not I am an Armenian. You say your name. But when you are forced to convert to a religion that forces you to change your name to something else, to Mahmed or Mehmet or Ali, it is violating the inner core of your soul, inner core of your identity. And that's part of cultural genocide. And that's something that Raphael Lemkin fought very hard to have included in the Human Rights Charter of the UN, in the Genocide Declaration, and he didn't manage to for political reasons. We can talk about that some other time. But that they are victims of a self-perpetuating genocide that has been going on for a century by the perpetrating the state that is still unrepentant and unpunished. So that's why I object to taking their conversion at face value. It's part of the mechanics of genocide that prevail in Turkey. As I said before, and I'm going to repeat, Turkey is a vast ecosystem of genocide that leaves you with no choice but to convert outside, some quarters in Constantinople.
And my final question, because I think we're coming to the end of our time, is for both of you, Avedis and Tigrane. You both spent time in Turkey. You both looked into this subject of Islamized Armenians. You both also mentioned Hrant Dink, who spoke about secret Armenians and crypto Armenians. And we know about the state campaign to silence his voice that eventually led to his assassination. I'm wondering, are there any risks to going to Turkey and trying to unpack this subject? Is it safe to do so?
Well, definitely not in the current context of radicalization, of the growing nationalism. Turkey now is like a drunk boat and a paramilitary state. And there is a lot of comparison between the current Recep Tayyip Erdogan regime and Abdulhamid, the Red Sultan regime, because as you guys Turkey is a country which not peace. We never live in peace. There's no domestic stability, and as well as the threat of the domestic enemy, domestic threat, which is the Kurds, the Armenians, the Greeks. You carry on. Is it possible to assess the question of Islamized Armenians as a question of history of or I don't know. So the question is to understand, assess how strategic is this topic and how it constitutes a threat for Turkey's concern, safety, and security. And on the other hand, I think that Avedis Hadjian is really right when he thought about the continuation of the genocide, because as I start my my talk about by stressing the fact that Turkey is prisoner of the past, and in Turkey you consider Armenian genocide question like the Cyprus question, the Kurdish question, minorities, human rights question as the same whole. And the fact is, it's no more a memory question; it's a question of security, and we are not fully aware about this. It's like the syndrome of Sèvres, you know, in Turkey. The threat, the fear that Turkey will be once again disintegrated by domestic and foreign enemy. So as long as we, as Turks, are completely traumatized by this question, it's very hard to get an approach, an academic approach, political approach, sociological approach. But I do believe that thanks to Turkish civil society and Armenian progressists in Turkey and Kurdish progressists in Turkey, we can, I think, I'm not sure, but we can find a way to modernize diaspora, to modernize Armenian diaspora, because the structures, the church, press, political traditional parties, and other organizations are not fit with the current challenges. They are living in the past, and they are no more able to assess the new challenges of Armenianness in the 21st century. So we must be thankful to this kind of people who are striving or fighting to democracy in Turkey, because thanks to them, we can, I do hope, we can update our software.
And Avedis, same question. Is it safe to go to Turkey and unpack this topic?
I wouldn't go again. I got detained, if not arrested, a couple of times.
Me too.
Yeah, so that's inevitable in Turkey, right? And yeah, you can't go to a country where, you know, the dictator calls even physics teachers terrorists. So, you know, it's very unsafe currently. It is generally unsafe, but I think chance had it that at the time I traveled there to write a book, or to gather materials to write the book. It turned out to be a window of opportunity when things were more or less relaxed. But even at the time, as you know, as I was wrapping up the so-called field trip, it was an extended stay in Turkey for almost 2 years. I came to realize something else, that for all the merits there are to the strides that civil society is doing in terms of repairing relations between Armenians and Turks and Kurds and all the interested parties, we are talking, and this is very important, about a genocidal state, and I can't emphasize this enough, in which the Armenian genocide, even though it is not acknowledged in most history books, was foundational for the Republic of Turkey. The Republic of Turkey is built on the Armenian genocide, the republic that Atatürk built, not because of the omission of the Armenian name. It means that that's not the causation or the foundational, the stepping stone of which the Turkish state was built, the modern Turkish state was built. It is a genocidal state. And as I said before, unpunished and unrepentant, that has educated an entire generation of Turks in that genocidal mindset. So they are casually genocidal. So that's why, and this is not as irrelevant as it might seem, that perfectly decent Kurds or Turks will casually ask you, where are the gold treasures buried of the Armenians? Because they think it's perfectly fine to steal gold from dead people because they don't need it anymore, and they don't see any affront, anything offensive in trying to dig up treasures in cemeteries. That's why they don't really understand why we Armenians are so upset over the genocide, because in their mindset and their incomplete and partial education, genocides are things that the states do when they win a war, and the states make war to expand their lands, because that's how they created their country. And that's why Erdogan, to make his point, desecrated Saint Sophia again to convert it from a museum, which is desecration in itself. He desecrated again to convert it into a mosque, because he still has that conqueror's mindset in a city that they have occupied for 6 centuries. It's because they still have that genocidal mindset, and it's an entire society that has grown up in that. And that's why by the time I was wrapping up my trip in Turkey in 2014, after 2 years there, I had decided not to go back there, because it's an entire society that has been educated, quote unquote. I don't know what's the opposite of educated in terms of antonyms in verbs, but uneducated in a genocidal mindset. So just imagine how many decades it took for Europe to denazify Germany, and imagine how long it would take to denazify or to de-Turkify, to call it something, Turkey after a century or more of genocidal mindset and practice. Successful at that. Successful because of unpunished.
And finally, gentlemen, any closing thoughts? What would your message be to people watching, to Armenians watching? What would you say about this topic, just as a closing thought for our watchers? Avedis, if you want, you can start.
To keep talking to them, to keep engaging them. They are fantastic people. And that's something else I have to add for all the things that I said about Turkey and Turkish society. I met all sorts of fantastic people there. Most of them they are extremely hospitable. They come extremely friendly. And most of them are nice people who love their families and their kids. But that's not enough to make things right after a century of unrecognized genocide. Having said that, to narrow down my answer, if I were to have humbly message for my diaspora brethren, it would be to continue engaging our Islamicized fellow Armenians in Turkey. They need us as much as Tigrane was saying, as much, and I agree completely with him on that, as much as we need them to revitalize our diaspora and to rethink new paradigms about the Armenian identity, as much as we need them. They are lovely, wonderful people, and I really encourage, and I see that they are engaging on social networks. So that would be it. I really have nothing else to add to that, and to respect them. So not to proselytize. We may tend to proselytize. I would love to wake up and to see them, back in the fold, being Armenian, being Christian. But it is what it is. And the first rule to engage with anyone and have a meaningful communication or meaningful relationship is to respect them for what they are or for who they are.
Okay, it's very hard to to add something after Avedis' moving speech, but I think that we have two kind of message to deliver: one to diaspora and to our Armenians, our friends from Armenia, to be humble, to recognize how complex is the Armenian world, and to forget proselytism or no, as well chauvinism, which is something that's Armenians used to be chauvinist, and we must admit that it's a kind of a complex of inferiority for small peoples, and to be very more. So the other thing is that we have a lot of things to learn from for the Islamized Armenians, and ideally the future of our relation must be established on a kind of interdependence, because we waste a lot of time. We waste a lot of time by claiming the recognition of the genocide, the recognition at an international scale. And we forget that the Armenian question is just a question of justice, but it's first and foremost a humanitarian question of humanism, and not a question of clash of civilizations or minority versus majority, etc. It's a humanitarian issue. And if we can find new channels of communications in another way with our Islamist Armenian friends, we will start a new narrative. And this narrative must be built together with Armenia, with Diaspora, with Turkish civil society. And once again, without being naive and fully aware about how the current complex is hard, is difficult, Islamized Armenian issue belongs to the agenda of Armenian nation in the 20th century. And it's up to Armenian elites to assess this question and to remind that we cannot afford to miss this opportunity to start a new story, a new beginning, by understanding that we need them. Yes, we really need to get more closer to Islamized Armenian, because they are the unique people, the unique group who can help us to reconcile with our past, with our identity, and with the cost of the past.
Well, thank you both for that very insightful conversation. A lot to think about. Thank you both for your time.
Thank you, Emilio. Thank you, Tigrane.
Welcome.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Lucas.
Emilio, for your work, your thoughts.